don't know if... Did you get a copy of the handout?
I think so.
Yeah, okay, good. Even though it's not the best translation. Just a word about the flu. My advice is don't get it. Even if they're selling it for half price, don't get it. Boy. I used to tell my kids who were afraid of mice, who's bigger, you or the mouse? I said, I'm bigger. So why are you running away from the mouse? Who's bigger, you or the virus? Well, there's a lot of them. Okay, the ones that are in your body, if you put them all together, they wouldn't fit in the head of a pin, right? So the whole bunch of them is smaller than you are. Doesn't matter. They can knock you out, boy. It's really knocked out. Okay, we're up to the Rambam described 3 groups of people. Those who, the first 2 both take what's written in the rabbinic sources as literally understood as the meaning of the authors. This is what they meant to convey. And when the statements are, on the face of it, absurd, the first group pledges allegiance and says we believe them and we're very frum because we believe these absurd things. And the second group, which is worse, says the Rambam, says that's what they meant, and what they meant is absurd, and therefore they made mistakes. And they're even worse. We're on page 11. That's even worse. And the third group is the ones who said, we're convinced of their wisdom, and we're not going to contradict our minds, which tell us that the statements are absurd, and therefore, we are going to assume that they had another meaning that we're not aware of. And he used this he said the rest of this essay and his writings in general are for people in the third group. Because what he's going to tell us is something which only people in the third group will be able to stand. They'll only be able to take it. Because it will go against many of their natural assumptions, preconceptions, things they think of as obviously correct. And it takes a special kind of person to be able to rethink the things that seem to him to be obviously correct. And he, in particular now, he started off with the question of what is the purpose? What is God's purpose in commanding us to do mitzvos, including studying Torah? And he had 5 groups which had 5 different descriptions of what the purpose was. And all of them were some kind of physical enjoyment. And he said, now, these are the main groups that talk about this and think about this. And this is what they all agree on, that it's some kind of physical enjoyment. Well, guess what? I have to tell you that they're all dead wrong. They're all dead wrong. Because the world to come has no physicality in it whatsoever. Now, if you're part of the 80% of the population, and you're one of these 5 groups, and you're taking this for granted, somebody says, the whole thing's a myth, the whole thing's off the page, that's going to be very hard for you to swallow. So, if you're not a person in the third group, you're just not going to take it. And that the statements of the sages and some of the verses that the 5 groups brought to support their view of what the world to come is, they were not meant in the ways in which they portrayed them. So, okay, let's start at the top of the page. I don't remember if I did this last time or not, but we'll introduce for today. In the world to come, our souls will become wise out of the knowledge of God, the Creator, as the higher physical bodies do. Now, this I told you, or even why it's wrong. It's dead wrong. It says the higher physical bodies do from what they know of God the Creator, not wiser than that. Not that they can't be wiser, but that's not what it says. The spiritual Dovid is not divisible into parts, nor can it be described by any analogy explain it. Now, it's very interesting when you say it can't be divided into parts. Even certain simple pleasures can be divided into parts. The taste of wine. Just go to a winery, and he can talk for 5 minutes, describe to you all the subtleties in the taste of the foretaste and the aftertaste and the top of the tongue and the bottom of the tongue, and we swish it around your mouth and so forth and so on. Or the beauty of a picture. It can be the brilliance of the colors, it can be the balance of the picture, it can be the subtlety of... one of the things in art that's so impressive is that you can take materials and through those materials express or represent items which are utterly different in their nature from the material you're using. So you have a dress that's chiseled in stone, and you see the softness and the flexibleness of the cloth, and it's stone. Hello, it's stone. That's quite a remarkable achievement, that you can make stone look like cloth. So this isn't like that. It's not that you can take it apart into different dimensions, and say it's this plus this together, this relating to this together. It's a single thing. I don't know if we have anything in this world. Maybe, although they do this with sound, maybe experientially, a note of a violin is heard as one thing. You could pull it apart physically, but it'd be hard to pull it apart experientially. He says, so it can't be divisible into parts, and it can't be described by any analogy explain it, because it isn't the kind of thing that happens in our world. The prophet said when he was awestruck at the lofty magnificence of thy good, how great is your goodness which you have hidden away for them who fear you. And he didn't say it because I saw it and now I know what it is, and therefore it's not hidden from me. That's not. He understood that it was something that was hidden, and he expressed that it was hidden. Now, our sages also wrote, in the world to come, there's no eating, drinking, washing, anointing, or sexual intercourse. And the Rambam takes from that there's no physicality. In other words, these are just examples of things that physical bodies do. And when Chazal said they don't do these things, they meant to convey to you the general idea that there are no physical bodies at all. Not everybody agreed with that. I think it's the Nemuka Yosef who says, if Chazal wanted to communicate to us that there are no physical bodies, they could have said there are no physical bodies. That would have been simpler, faster, more precise. They picked out these 5 things. It sounds like, on the contrary, there are physical bodies and they don't do these 5 things, but they're still there. So there's no proof that the Rambam is right, as far as I can tell, from this statement in Chazal. Did Moses have a physical body on Har Sinai? He didn't eat, he didn't drink, and he didn't sleep, which is in one of the verses explicitly, because it says when he was praying for them after the golden calf, he prayed day and night. Well, people who have physical bodies typically need to eat, drink, and sleep. But the fact that he didn't eat, drink, and sleep didn't mean he didn't have a body. He had a body that didn't need to eat, drink, and sleep. So, the Rambam's proof here is not something which is absolutely binding, as far as I can tell. Now he says, but the righteous sit with their crowns on their heads, enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. Now, let's see. If they aren't physical, what does it mean they have crowns on their heads? He's got to answer that. He does right away. In this passage, the expression with the crowns on the head signifies the immortality of the soul being in firm possession of the idea, which is God the Creator. The crown is precisely the idea which great philosophers have explicated at length. The expression, they delight in the radiance of the divine presence. Oh, strobe light? I mean, what kind of radiance is it, Sparklers? No, it's not physical at all. It means the souls enjoy blissful delight in their attainment of knowledge of the truly essential nature of God the Creator. A delight which is like that experienced by the holy angels who know existence firsthand, though I think that that's also, I'm going to check the Hebrew for that. Because I believe that, it says, of course, like is very weak. Here it is. Yeah. Like. In other words, the enjoyment that the human soul will have there is enjoyment of knowing God the Creator. Now, let me just make sure. It's not knowing that God is the Creator. It's not knowing that proposition. No, it's knowing God, who is the Creator. In English, K-N-O-W is used in two different ways, in which in French and German are two different verbs entirely. In German, they told me it was kennen and wissen. Maybe in French, it's savoir and connaître. In English, K-N-O-W can mean knowledge of a proposition, that such and such is true. Or it could be knowledge of an object by having had direct experience of the object. So, we all know that Joe Biden is president. None of us knows Joe Biden. To know him would mean to have had some personal interaction with him. Here, we're talking about knowing God. Not knowing the proposition that he's the Creator, knowing God, who is the Creator. That knowledge, which comes from an interaction, is what provides the joy. Now, our joy will come from that knowledge, just like the angels, who are abstract and have no bodies, and never had any bodies, also know the Creator. They know God. But it doesn't mean that the amount, depth, and breadth of the knowledge they have is equal to ours. That, it doesn't say here. And as I have told you, in the 8th chapter of the Laws of Tshuva, which he wrote in Hebrew, it says, Masigim amitas mitziuso. Amitas means the essence of his existence. And that it doesn't say here. So I'm inclined to think that human beings, after death, get a knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu which transcends that of the angels. And I think I can even explain that. Angels, the tradition tells us, that each angel has a different job. And each angel has one job. That one job defines what it is. The Rambam explains this in the Mishnah Torah. How do you distinguish things that are abstract from one another? You can't distinguish them other than by the qualities that they have. Unlike physical things, you could have two pencils which were identical in size and weight and color and consistency and strength and everything else, but one is on the table and one is on the chair. So there are two of them. That's what makes them two. Even though all the qualities are the same, physical position can make them into two. But when you're talking about abstract things, they're not in physical space at all. So if you tell me I got an A and I got a B, A's qualities are PQR, and B's qualities are PQR, then A is B. Because all that there is to the thing is its qualities. There isn't anything else. So you can't have two angels doing the same job. Because if they have the job is this stamp of their essence, they have the same essence and they're the same angel. You can't be two angels. No way to pull them apart and differentiate them. That means that an angel has very narrow vision, what they call in optics tunnel vision. You know, there are some people whose vision, like when they look at the room, all they see is what's at the end of a tunnel. All the rest of the room is black. You just see that one circle in the middle there. So their vision is accurate, but very narrow. And I think that it takes breadth of vision to be able to appreciate amitas mitziuso, the essence of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's existence. This is a little bit like, I believe it's Yerushalmi, where Menashe, one of the famous kings, who was quite evil until the end of his days when he did tshuva, when he died, the angel said, we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created tshuva, and we know that tshuva helps to repair the mistakes you've made, but not Menashe. Not Menashe. He went too far. And all the paths up to Gan Eden were blocked by the angels. They set up roadblocks and said, he's not going up. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He created a channel directly up from underneath the Kisei HaKavod, the throne of glory, and brought him up that way. Now, this is how when you read something like that in Chazal, you have to realize they chose the metaphor carefully. So the angels are wrong. He did go up. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't do it by breaking the roadblocks, which he could easily have done. No, every roadblock was right. He can't come up this way. It's not appropriate for him to come up this way. That's what the angels saw. The angels saw correctly. But each angel, so to speak, saw only one path. And he saw correctly that he can't come up on this path. But there are other ways to go up. That he couldn't see, because that requires a wider scope. So I'm just illustrating the idea that angels have very narrow scope. According to the Rambam, the spheres move. They move because they contemplate an angel, and that angel embodies a certain principle, and that principle motivates the spheres to move. The spheres are living beings that can move on their own, like animals can move on their own. They can generate their own motion, but the different spheres move differently. They move in different directions. They move in different speeds. Each sphere has its own angel, and that angel motivates the motion of that sphere. So again, each one is narrowly defined. It's only functioning in one context. So when he says here that our enjoyment will be like the enjoyment of the angels, it doesn't mean identical to. It can mean it has the same object and it has the same relationship, but not the same depth or breadth of understanding. It's also like the Rambam has levels of nevuah, of prophecy. They're all called Nevi'im, but they're not equal. They're grasped, but the clarity of their vision, the depth of their vision isn't equal, even though they're all prophets. So don't think that there's no distinction between the soul of a human being, which is after death, when it parts from the body, is purely abstract, versus the angels, who are also purely abstract, that there's no difference between them. There could be a very great difference between them. Did you want to answer the question? No?
Why does an angel is given the ability to just, even to eat the bread of shame, as they call it, but as it's called, but human, he's able to attain much greater enjoyment and understanding of Hashem, but he's also able to lose everything.
Why isn't the tradition worried about the fact that the ultimate... No, let me work this out now, what you're saying, because this idea of the bread of shame, as far as I know, is not brought in the Rambam at all. I don't believe the Rambam brings it. So, could be that he doesn't agree with it. Remember that something that's said in the Talmud, in the name of a single scholar, the Rambam, on occasion, will say, I know other statements elsewhere, or verses that contradict it, and therefore there are different opinions, and I think that this opinion is wrong. He does that with the 6,000 years. So the fact that it's stated, that happens to be Yerushalmi. The fact that it's stated doesn't mean that he has to accept it. I don't know anywhere where he discusses it even. So if we're talking in the context of the Rambam's thought, he seems to have no connection with that idea. You're starting with the idea that the bread of shame is an issue, and the world was created for human beings so that we can avoid the bread of shame, and that therefore, why is it that the angels don't have something to enable them to avoid the bread of shame?
Well, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking why are they allowed to attain some inferior amount of pleasure without some understanding of Hashem, without any sort of work or anything to.
Well, you used the phrase bread of shame. That comes with a whole package of reasoning. If that's not what you meant, okay, we'll erase that. Now you're asking, well, I mean, why should work be a kind of natural necessity before pleasure? There are animals whose whole lives are pleasure, essentially. They do very well. They're strong. They eat well, and they chase their prey. Not elephants. They don't. Elephants eat. Nothing chases them. There's no predators for elephants. I mean, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't require the effort to achieve is because of the bread of shame, and that's only applies to people with free will. Human beings, because they have free will. But why shouldn't the Kadosh Baruch Hu create creatures that have pleasures without them?
Because what if I feel like any sort of pleasure has to be earned to some extent.
I'll tell you, the way that the argumentation of bread of shame works out, it starts the opposite side. Why did Kodesh Baruch Hu require us to earn anything at all? Why didn't he just give it to us free? He created the world out of chesed, out of loving kindness. Right? Wouldn't it have been the most extraordinary, most extreme loving kindness just to give us olam haba? No objections on that. No one's going to say, oh, but you didn't work to get there. So what? He's giving me good. He's holding back the good in the meantime and making me work for it. That needs an explanation. It's the work that needs an explanation, not the giving you the good that needs an explanation. The answer is that if I didn't work, one answer is that if I didn't work, the good would not be as good as it could possibly be, because it would be stained by lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-respect. And the other is Ramchal and Derech Hashem, Perek Beis, which we've done many times at great length. But the problem is not, you got pleasure, you should have worked for it. That's once you know you're starting with Chesed. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, why is in this statement the Rambam attaching to knowing God, which is the creator? Like why is it attached, the which is the creator, together with knowing God?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I don't know. I'll say something simple, which is an answer on the surface. Many of the other characteristics that we associate with the Kodesh Baruch Hu follow from being the creator. So that if you want to sum up in one word the concept, creator would be the best word. He knows everything. Well, if he created and creates everything, he knows his own handiwork, so he knows everything. If he created and creates everything, then he has absolute power over it. So he's certainly all-powerful. Given that he is absolute perfection, being the creator, he can only be creating it for the sake of the world. He can't be created for the sake of anything else, because he doesn't need anything else. So the word creator encompasses within it many of the qualities that we associate with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. So it may not mean creator as opposed to other things. It means creator as meaning to include other things. And that's why it's chosen. But it's a very good question. I didn't think of the diuk. Okay. So now, the idea that the crown signifies the immortality of the soul getting to the point where I think maybe I should just translate from here. Yeah. Let's see. Comes over to us. Yeah. Okay, that's the best I can do for that. So that's what the world to come is. Set out. Not only is the abstract description of the pleasure one that doesn't fit the kinds of pleasures we have in this world, but the idea that the pleasure is generated by knowledge is also something which doesn't. Most people don't get pleasure out of knowledge per se. When they do, it is only a small part of the kind of pleasure that they have in the world. Here it's the now. So now the next. Okay, so I see the translation here. I don't know, he writes here supernal fellowship. I don't know, that's not in the Hebrew. He says the good and the purpose, the full ultimate purpose to get to that position of people of great status and to exist in that environment, within that boundary, and the persistence of the soul unendingly, like the persistence of the Creator. So he now is introduced an idea that in this condition, there will be a shared quality between the Creator and his creation. Of course, the Kodesh Baruch Hu is causing us to have that quality. He has it for himself of necessity. It's causing us to have it, but the quality is there. Eternal existence. And he says it's like. So he's drawing an analogy between the Creator and the creation. That he is the reason, the cause of the soul's continuing existence with that understanding in its mind. And here I mentioned to you the idea also, which I never saw in the Rambam, the idea that in the world to come, things can't be constant. I told you the Ramchal, who says that in this world, if you have a constant pleasure, after a while you just don't feel it anymore. How much vanilla ice cream can you eat? You know, if every 2 or 3 weeks you have some chocolate, then you have your taste for vanilla. But if you just have vanilla all the time, you get tired of it. You can't taste it anymore. Sound. There are people who live in the vicinity of a waterfall. They don't hear it. They get so used to it, it doesn't impact on their consciousness. If you turn off the waterfall, then they're all out of bed and what happened? You know, the end of the world, right? Because the repeated, constant stimulus deadens the sensors. And the Ramchal, to me, surprisingly says, if that's the way it is in this world, that's the way it's got to be in the next world. It can't be just the same thing all the time. And he quotes, and the Gemara actually quotes it, they go from strength to strength. Tzadikim ein lehem menucha lo b'olam hazeh v'lo b'olam haba. Tzadikim have no rest, not in this world, not in the next world. And that's explained as this hasaga, this understanding, increases unendingly. It gets bigger and bigger unendingly. And the increase brings more and more pleasure, more and more joy. The Rambam has no picture of that. The Rambam says you achieve that understanding of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's essence, and that gives gigantic pleasure, and that's it. And that's the condition that you stay in forever. So there's quite a big difference of approach here, and as I say, there are Gemaras which the Rambam is not using. And this is the great good, to which no other good can be compared, and there's no pleasure that can be used to analogize it. How could that which is continuous, unendingly, with something that has an interruption? Now he picks out this particular quality. This is what you could call a kind of structural quality, and that's how long it goes on, or how constantly it goes on, not what it is. But that as a feature which you could analogize in a kind of pleasure that has a stopping point, has an interruption. So he doesn't explain this, but maybe what he's saying is against what the Ramchal said. That in this world, pleasures have a stopping point, and maybe that's because if they don't have a stopping point in this world, then you get tired of them in this world, and then they lose their ability to please you in this world, and you lose your ability to perceive them in this world, because that's the way this world is built. That world isn't built that way. And we live in this world. Our whole experience is of this world. So nothing in this world is going to be analogous to what's going on there, because it's structurally different from what happens in this world. Whereas the Ramchal says, from this world, you can judge what the next world has to be like. And that's why some of the verses talk about this. It says, "L'man yitav l'cha v'harachta yamim." This is I think is the promise for Shiloh HaKain, if I'm not mistaken. In order to do good to you, and you should have length of days. And we have a tradition from our sages that means to do good for you in the world that is all good, and length of days in the world which is all long. It goes on forever. So there, it's not promising you a reward in this world, it's promising you a reward in the next world. Okay, we're together? All right. Now, remember that in some of the cases of the 5 original groups on Olam Haba, they also express themselves as to what the greatest evil would be. So now he does that. He says, in this case, the great evil is the soul being cut off and lost. It will not be in that preserved state. That's what's called kares in the Torah. Kares means being cut off. And the word kares, he says, means hit batlut, which means ceasing to exist. His batlus nefesh. Kamosha bir va'amar, hikares tikares nefesh ahi. There's a verse that doubles the verb. Cut off that soul. V'amru, and the sages said, hikares b'olam hazeh, tikares l'olam haba. It'll be cut off in this world and cut off in the next world. Meaning, cut off in this world means it will die prematurely, earlier than otherwise. And we cut off in the next world, meaning that it will not participate in that eternal existence at all. It just ceases to exist. Now, this idea that a neshama, I have to say this carefully, maybe I've not said it carefully in the past, that a neshama will cease to exist. I think I used to say could, but I'm thinking, no, that's not quite right. The neshama will cease to exist is a big disagreement. The Rambam says neshama will cease to exist. That's something he has as a general principle, never retreats on it. Ramban says it's impossible. It will not happen. I shouldn't say impossible. It will not happen. The Ramchal says both. One in one sefer, one in another. And Derech Hashem, he says 3 times that certain neshamas could be lost. In the Pesach Vedas, he says that it won't happen. I asked people, Ramchal scholars, was there any resolution? They didn't know of any. But let's not make the mistake that I used to make. It's not a question of whether the soul could cease to exist or not, because Baruch Hu can do what he wants. He's in control. The Ramban says the following. In this world, nothing ceases to exist. I don't know how he knew that. What? Conservation of mass energy? How could he possibly know that nothing ceases to exist? You burn up a log, some smoke goes into the sky, and that's it. Where's the log? The smoke didn't carry the whole quantity of the log. Smoke went up, the log was heavy, sits down. How did he know that it was just transformation and not disappearance, real disappearance? I have no clue how he knew that. And he says, if nothing ceases to exist in this world, surely the soul, which is spiritual, will not cease to exist. But again, not that Kodesh Baruch Hu couldn't do it. He just won't. And I can prove to you that that's what he meant, because one of the places Chazal say that the soul will be burned by fire, and he says, the critics asked, but the soul isn't something physical. So how can it be burned by fire? And he says, the Creator who made the soul could also make a fire that would burn the soul. Thank you very much. Don't put limits on the Creator. So it's not that the Creator couldn't annihilate the soul. He's not going to. The Rambam says he is. Now, when you calculate that with respect to the idea that Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world out of loving kindness, it needs work. Where's the loving kindness to a soul which, after an earthly career, doesn't get eternal Olam Haba? That soul doesn't seem to be receiving kindness. How is that consistent with the idea that the whole purpose of the creation is loving kindness? I worked on that for a long time, and I came with what I think is an answer. After that, there's a harder question, which I didn't answer. One of my friends answered. I'll tell you about that maybe next time. But let's see. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I think, for this question, has two choices. He can create the world with a guarantee that every soul will last forever, or not. What will be the consequences? Well, we have a rule that in Olam Haba, you get what you deserve. You get what you earned. Chazal say, the soul there is matzdik alav es adin. He agrees that the judgment that was passed on him is a just judgment. And when he gets the reward in Olam Haba, he'll be able to trace everything that Olam Haba is for him to the things that he did. And we've spoken about this. It's not payment. It's that you build in yourself certain abilities, and those abilities enable you to experience Olam Haba. So, you're hearing certain things, understanding certain things, feeling certain things. That's because I did this, and that's because I did this, and that's because I did this. Let's ask, what about just the very fact that you're in Olam Haba rather than not? What did you do to deserve that? Well, if Kodesh Baruch Hu creates the world with a guarantee that every soul will automatically go to Olam Haba, then there's nothing that you did to deserve that. Because you couldn't have lost that. There's no action of yours. You can say, see, I had a choice between A and B. I chose A. That's why I'm here. Had I chosen B, I wouldn't have been here. Because there's no such choice. It's guaranteed you're going to be there. So that means there'll be one feature in Olam Haba which isn't earned. It isn't earned. It's given as a divine gift with no strings attached. Well, there is a value in being able to say, each thing that I have in Olam Haba, I earned. So it seems like if HaKadosh Baruch Hu guarantees the existence of every soul to be eternal, that particular value isn't going to be realized. The value of those in Olam Haba being able to say, I'm here rather than not because of something that I did. So there's a trade-off here. On the one hand, the guarantee is a great chesed to each soul that it's there. But it's a penalty to all the souls that are there that they can't say they earned being there. What's the alternative? The alternative is the opposite. Because Baruch Hu says it's not guaranteed. You have to do some things to earn it. You have to avoid some things that would lose it. That will mean that some souls will lose it. But the result will be that all the souls that are there have now a complete application of earning it to everything about being there, even just being there rather than not being there. So to make this into an objection against the Rambam, you'd have to argue that the creation with a guarantee of eternal life for all souls, with the loss of earning being in the world to come, is better than a world in which some souls can be lost, but all the rest of the souls can earn being in Olam Haba. I think that's going to be a hard argument to make. It's going to be hard to say that there's a kasha on the Rambam. If the world is created out of loving kindness, why some souls can be lost? They don't have to be lost, but they can be. You could even say it's a given free will. It could be expected that it will happen. Of course, Baruch Hu knows beforehand that it's going to happen. But I think to make it into a kasha is going to be very hard. You have a question? Okay. So that, I think, I have an answer to. I'll tell you the second. I'm sorry, say something? No. The second question, which I'll tell you today, and then tomorrow, Mr. Hashem, I'll tell you my Chavus's answer. There are a few sources which describe the idea of eternal suffering. No, that's not a totally non-Jewish idea. Many sources don't agree, but there are sources that talk about eternal suffering, a soul that will exist for eternity suffering. That's much harder. much harder to see how loving kindness could be expressed in a position like that. I struggled with that and failed. But my chavrusa, Rabbi Chaim Carmel, told me a very beautiful, very deep and beautiful explanation, but I can't do it in 2 minutes, so I'm not going to do it today. Okay? He says, yeah, and he brings another verse. This is, I think, Elisha talking to Eliyahu. He says, when you go to heaven, the soul of my master will be bound up in the bond of life. That means, that's not true for everybody. It's not automatic. And he says, somebody who's attached to physical pleasures, I don't know what this word is. Ubachal be'emes, ubikir es a batel. Nichras may also, yeah. He's just addicted to physical pleasures, and he can't detach himself. He invested himself in something that's transient. Then he's cut off from that exalted position. You know, there's a chazal that says, "Kasher even the base, kemachet the basachai." We talked about this once. You have to be very careful with chazal. The worm is as difficult to the dead as a needle is to living flesh. So you read that superficially, and you don't know how to read chazal, and you think that means dead bodies must feel, because it's like comparing it to a needle, right? But the Mefarshim, most of the Mefarshim, the Mishnayos there, say, look at the imbalance in this statement. The worm is difficult to the dead as the needle is to living flesh. Why isn't it flesh, or living dead? Why is the one place got flesh, the other place hasn't got flesh? It's not parallel. It should have said the worm is as difficult for dead flesh as a needle is to live flesh. That would have been flesh. Or it could have said the worm is difficult to the dead as a needle is to the live. It doesn't say either of those. It says the worm is difficult to the dead as the needle is to live flesh. So the answer that they give is that you're not talking about the dead body feeling. We're talking about is this. Death for us is the separation of the soul and the body, but the soul doesn't just evaporate, or it doesn't absent itself for a period of time. It follows what happens to the body. It follows the burial, and it's around the family and the burial place for a week for the family, and for a year for the burial place, and so on and so on. What's going on there? Well, it depends upon what kind of body, what kind of soul, what kind of life the person lived. And if the person was overly invested in physical pleasure, when the body deteriorates, the soul is in terrible, terrible pain, because there's the kli, there's the instrument with which all that pleasure came to it, and that instrument is going to rot. So the pain is felt by the soul seeing the disintegration of the body. That's kosher l'meis, not the So he's saying that someone gets to the point where he's so identified with and immersed in physical pleasure that the things that aren't transient don't relate to him anymore. I said this really a moment ago, and then I'm going to really quit. I said, well, reward isn't like being paid money for doing a job. It's that you build something in yourself, I said, with which you can experience Olam Haba. I said that because I was meramis to this idea. So if you don't invest in building it, there's nothing in you that can enjoy Olam Haba. The only alternative is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should create in you something with which you could enjoy Olam Haba. But that is subject to the idea of which is a better world, the one where there's guaranteed existence but no credit for being there, versus no guaranteed existence and some people are lost, but all the people who are there get credit for being there. And that, I say, is not obvious. Okay. Glad to be back.